Every vision in From has been pointed at the future since episode 1. Every painting, every nightmare, every drawing pinned to a wall in the colony house. We've all been trained to read it the same way. Something bad is coming, and someone in this town just caught an early glimpse of it. I don't think that's what's happening. I think almost every one of those images is pointed backward, not forward. Not a warning about tomorrow, but a record of something that already happened more than once to people this town has already erased. If that idea holds up, it changes how you should watch nearly every flashback, every mural, and every dream sequence this show has ever given us. Let's get into it. If you're new to the channel or new to the show, here's the short version. From is the MGM Plus horror series about a town that swallows travelers whole. You take a wrong turn, your car stalls, and suddenly you live in a place ringed by forest, patrolled by something monstrous once the sun goes down, and functionally impossible to leave. 4 seasons in, MGM Plus confirmed this story was always built to run 5 seasons. And season 5, now in the works, will be the final one. Production is set to begin later this year in Halifax, Nova Scotia, with a release currently expected sometime in 2027. So we're near the end of this particular loop, which makes it the right moment to question what the show's central images have actually been telling us. A few terms quickly so the rest of this makes sense. The bottle tree is the central tree in the woods, hung with bottles that act like a ward, or possibly a lock. The tunnels underneath the town hold the remains of children the show calls the Anghui, sacrificed generations ago in whatever event started this whole nightmare. Talismans are small protective charms residents hang on their doors to keep the creatures out at night. The man in yellow is the recurring antagonist, capable of taking over the bodies of people who've died in the town. And the boy in white appears to be working against him, guiding certain residents toward the truth, though never in a way that makes their job easy. Keep those 5 terms in your head because the theory leans on all of them. Here's the standard reading of this show's mythology. Someone draws or paints something, and later it happens, so the show treats it as a premonition. Miranda paints a scene, and we assume she glimpsed a future event. Victor sketches a monster, a tree, a cave, and we assume he's warning the group about what's coming for them. Tabitha sees Jim in danger before it happens, and we assume the town is giving her a window to save him. Every one of those moments gets read as forward-facing, but the show has already told us, on screen, that this town runs on repetition, not prophecy. Tabitha is confirmed to be the same soul that once lived as Miranda. Jade is confirmed to be the same soul that once lived as Christopher. That's not a fan theory anymore. The show locked it in at the end of season 3, when the numbers hidden in the bottle tree turned out to be a melody, and playing it cracked open both of their buried memories at once. So if the same 2 roles keep returning in new bodies, why would we assume the images those roles produce are previews of what's ahead instead of residue from what already happened to the version of them that came before? Start with the very first supernatural image the show ever gave an audience. Before a single monster appears on screen, a family is driving through the countryside and a tree has fallen across the road. That's the moment they get pulled into the town. For years, that image reads as a gate, a rite of passage, you hit the tree, and now you're a resident. But the season 4 finale quietly redefines what a fallen tree means in this universe, because in that episode, the bottle tree itself gets pulled out of the ground on purpose, by people trying to end the cycle for good. A fallen tree in this show isn't the start of something. It's what's left over after somebody's rescue attempt collapses. Look at that opening image again with that in mind. A new family isn't arriving at the beginning of a story. They're arriving at the wreckage of somebody else's ending, and the show lets them mistake it for a doorway. This is where the confirmed reincarnation twist really pays off, because Miranda isn't a random side character with visions. She is the earlier version of Tabitha. So when Miranda paints 2 figures heading into the tunnels, the instinct is to ask how she could have known what Boyd and Jade were gonna do decades later. That's the wrong question, because Miranda and Tabitha are the same person across time. The better question is, who did Miranda see doing that before Boyd and Jade even existed? Maybe it was her and Christopher. Maybe it was an earlier pair the show hasn't introduced yet. Either way, the painting stops functioning as a crystal ball and starts functioning as a photograph of an attempt that already failed once before. Victor's sketches run on the same logic, just with worse resolution, because Victor lived through the collapse of an earlier version of this cycle as a child, and children who survive something like that rarely walk away with a clean narrative. They walk away with fragments, a shape, a color, a feeling they can't name yet. That's exactly how his drawings behave. Detailed enough to matter, vague enough that nobody, including Victor, can fully explain them. Real prophecy tends to be specific because it's aimed at one clear future event. What Victor is doing looks more like trauma archiving. He isn't predicting a massacre. He's the only surviving record of one, and large parts of the file are corrupted. If Victor is a damaged archive, Eloise might be the backup copy. She was present for pieces of the town's history that Victor either never witnessed or has since buried without realizing it. If her drawings or her memories ever get fully unpacked on screen, don't expect them to preview Season 5. Expect them to fill a hole in a cycle that already happened. One Victor's own memory simply can't reach on its own. Now the one that hits hardest, Tabitha's vision of Jim in danger. The show wants you to feel this as the tragedy of a wife who couldn't save her husband in time, and it is genuinely tragic. But look at the structure sitting underneath that grief. Every cycle, the returning rescuer has a spouse anchoring her to an ordinary life, a reason to hesitate before fully stepping into what the town needs from her. And every cycle, that anchor gets removed, not because the writers have it out for husbands specifically, but because the anchor role is structurally incompatible with the mission. Miranda had Henry. Tabitha had Jim. Here's the detail most breakdowns of this theory skip past. Watch what happens to Henry in the Season 4 finale. He isn't background noise anymore. He starts collecting evidence, misreading nearly all of it, and ends up pointing a gun at his own son out of fear that the entire town is a lie he's been trapped inside. That's the anchor role fraying in real time, decades after his own wife already lived through her version of this exact pattern. If the pattern is real, Henry doesn't get to sit this one out just because the town already took a spouse from his generation once. The mechanism doesn't check whether you've already paid that price before. Julie complicates this whole framework. And honestly, in the best possible way, because Julie can physically move between different points inside the town's timeline through what the show calls storywalking. Once one character can do that, the entire idea of a single fixed future starts to wobble. If Julie can land somewhere that hasn't happened yet from another character's perspective, or somewhere that already happened relative to her own personal timeline, then a vision matching up with a later event doesn't prove anyone saw the future. It might just mean two separate points on the timeline briefly lined up. Julie's ability isn't evidence for prophecy. If anything, it's the show quietly admitting that time doesn't move through this town in one straight line, which is exactly the kind of detail that supports memory over prediction. One more piece worth flagging before we zoom out, because it complicates the theory in an interesting way instead of just supporting it. Fatima's connection to the creatures started building the previous season, and in the Season 4 finale, she fully embraces it to save the group, transforming into one of them long enough to buy everyone time. That's not a repeated archetype we've seen across earlier cycles. That looks like a brand new role, forming for the first time, in real time, on screen. Which raises a fair question. If this town runs on recycled roles, what happens when a genuinely new one gets created mid-cycle? My read is that it doesn't break the memory theory, it extends it. Some roles are old wounds resurfacing. Fatima might be evidence that the town can also generate new ones when the old pattern isn't enough anymore, which is a much scarier idea than a simple repeating loop. Now, the obvious pushback. Isn't this just cherry-picking, matching old scenes to a theory after the fact because it feels satisfying? Fair concern, and it's worth taking seriously instead of waving it off. The difference between a cherry-picked pattern and a real one is whether it makes a prediction you can actually check later, not just an explanation you can bend to fit anything. So here's the test. If Season 5 gives us a clean, uncomplicated vision of something that has never happened before in any prior cycle, no echo, no repeated shape, nothing Victor's or Miranda's work has ever hinted at, then this theory is simply wrong, and that's worth saying plainly. But if Season 5 keeps tying new imagery back to something that already happened once, off-screen, to people we haven't fully met yet, the memory framework holds. And it holds because the show built it that way from the beginning, not because anyone is forcing it to fit. All of this lands differently once you look at where Season 4 actually left things. The group didn't just theorize about breaking the cycle, they acted on it. Tabitha and Jade went into the tunnels themselves and recovered the children's remains, believing that removing the bones, along with the tree, might finally end the loop for good. Instead, pulling the tree out seems to have removed a barrier rather than a threat. Day turned to night in the middle of the afternoon. The protective talismans got gathered up and dumped into a different tree entirely by the man in yellow, wearing yet another borrowed face. And for the first time in the show's run, the boy in white suggests to him that the outcome might not go his way this time. That detail matters, because it's the first real hint that a cycle everyone assumed was fixed might actually be capable of changing. And that lines up with what's happening outside the fiction, too. MGM Plus has confirmed Season 5 as the show's final chapter, describing it as the ending the creative team always had in mind rather than an open-ended extension, with the network noting this is the most-watched series in its history. Production begins later this year, with a release targeted for 2027, though an exact date hasn't been locked in yet. Inside the story and outside it, everything is pointing at the same conclusion. Whatever this cycle is, it's closing, one way or another. Let's make this theory earn its keep, because a theory nobody can check is just a guess with extra steps. Here's what I'd expect if the memory framework holds once Season 5 actually airs. 1. Any new image introduced next season gets explained as an echo of an earlier, unseen cycle, not a flash of something brand new. 2. Victor's and Eloise's imagery starts functioning like pieces of one sequence to assemble, rather than separate clues to decode one at a time. 3. Henry's unraveling continues, and he ends up either removed from the story or repositioned, mirroring what happened to Jim before him. 4. The show draws a clear line between Julie's story walking and everyone else's ordinary visions, confirming they don't come from the same source. And 5. Whatever ends this series depends on someone finally recognizing a pattern, rather than receiving brand new information from outside it. Write these down or drop them in the comments, and we can hold this video accountable once Season 5 actually lands. Here's the version of this I keep coming back to. This town has never needed to show anyone the future, because the future was never the trap. The trap is that everyone keeps mistaking an old wound for a brand new warning. Tabitha didn't need a vision to sense that Jim was in danger. She needed to stop treating a pattern that's already repeated for who knows how many cycles like a fresh surprise. Miranda's painting was never a message for people who hadn't arrived yet. It was a record left behind for people who had already forgotten. And that fallen tree in the very first episode was never the start of anything. It's the sound of the last attempt failing, right before the next one drives straight into it, mistaking the wreckage for a welcome sign. If this changes how you watch the show, that's the whole point of putting this video together. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one before Season 5 closes this loop for good. And tell me in the comments which character you think is quietly living out someone else's failed attempt without even knowing it yet.